The third expert left without saying goodbye. I watched him from the window, briefcase in hand, collar up against the November cold, moving fast like a man who wanted to forget he'd ever walked through our door. The second one had left the same way 2 days before. The first one had at least shaken hands. 5 of them came through that room over the course of 11 months. 5 people with degrees on their walls and certainty in their voices. They sat across from us, reviewed everything, asked their questions, and then, one by one, they went quiet. Some gave explanations that explained nothing. Some gave us paperwork that led nowhere. A few stopped returning calls altogether. I told my wife it was a process. I told her someone would eventually have the answer. I believed that for a long time. And then a woman in a diner uniform leaned across a laminate counter on a Tuesday morning and said 3 words to me. 3 words none of those experts had ever said, and I haven't been the same since. I need to tell you what those words were. But first, you need to understand what 11 months of silence does to a person. We moved to Harwick in the spring of the year before all of this. It was a small town, the kind where the gas station and the post office share a parking lot, where people wave at cars they don't recognize out of habit. My wife, Nora, had grown up 3 towns over. She wanted to raise our daughter somewhere that still felt like it had roots. I was a writer. I worked from home. I had no strong opinion about geography. I said yes. The house was older than we'd intended to buy. 1940s construction, original hardwood, a basement that smelled like mineral water and thyme. But the price was reasonable, and the light in the afternoon came through the kitchen windows in a way that made Nora immediately stop arguing about whether we could afford it. Our daughter May was 4 years old. She had a purple rain jacket she refused to take off indoors. She collected smooth stones from the driveway and kept them in a ceramic bowl by her bed. Those stones will matter later. I want you to remember them. The town itself was quiet in a way I found restful at first. The neighbors were polite but not intrusive. The coffee shop on Merchant Street knew our order by the 3rd visit. I started a new project. Nora found a part-time position at the library 2 days a week. It was ordinary in the best possible way. The kind of ordinary you don't appreciate until it's gone. It started in August. May's stones began disappearing. Not all at once. 1 or 2 at a time over the course of about 2 weeks. She'd count them before bed. She always counted them. It was part of the routine, and she'd come find me or Nora with a small frown and say the number was wrong. I told myself she was miscounting. She was 4. 4-year-olds miscount things, but May was particular about those stones. She knew each one. She'd named 2 of them, a flat grey one she called Silver, a small reddish one she called Pepper. Silver disappeared on a Wednesday. Pepper was gone by the following Sunday. She didn't cry. That was the part that stayed with me. She just looked at the bowl for a long moment and then said, quietly, "He took them again." I asked her who. She looked at me the way children look at adults when they've decided the adult won't understand. "The man who stands outside," she said. And then she asked for her dinner. I told myself she had an imaginary friend. Looking back, I should have asked which window. I should have asked what he looked like. I should have done a lot of things in August that I didn't do until November. That night I checked the door locks. Both of them. Twice. I told myself it was just habit. The first expert we called was a child psychologist. She was kind, professional, thorough. She spent 3 sessions with May and 2 with Nora and me. Her conclusion was that May was processing some generalized anxiety about the move, that the man outside was a projection, and that the missing stones were likely falling behind furniture or getting carried to other rooms the way small objects do in houses with children. She gave us a pamphlet. She said to call if anything escalated. 2 weeks later, our neighbor Raymond, a retired man in his 70s who spent his mornings on his porch, knocked on our door to ask if we'd had any trouble recently. He said he'd noticed something in our yard a few nights back. Couldn't make out what it was in the dark. Just a shape, he said. That didn't move the way an animal moves. I called the non-emergency police line. An officer came, walked the perimeter, found nothing, and told us motion, sensor lights would probably solve it. We installed the lights. They triggered almost every night for a week, and then stopped, not because nothing was there. I want to be clear about that. They stopped because someone had unscrewed the bulbs from the fixtures. Not broken them. Unscrewed them. Set them on the ground underneath, neatly, like they were being careful not to make noise. The second expert was a security consultant. He installed cameras. The cameras recorded 12 days of footage. On the 9th day, one exterior camera had been turned, not removed, not damaged, just rotated 45 degrees to face the siding of the house instead of the yard. Precise, deliberate. The consultant said it was likely a neighbor kid playing a prank. He said it with confidence. He stopped answering my calls after I sent him the footage timestamp showing it happened at 30:14 in the morning. Expert after expert after expert, a second psychologist, a private investigator who spent 2 weeks on it and returned our deposit, a forensic consultant who found something in the soil near the back fence, he wouldn't tell us what, and then submitted a report so vague it was functionally useless, a family therapist, a retired detective Nora found through a forum, academics, specialists, 25 of them over 11 months, and May, through all of it, kept counting her stones, kept coming to find us with that small, patient frown. The bowl was almost empty by October, November 4th, a Tuesday. Nora had taken May to her mother's for the week. I had insisted. I told her I needed to stay, that I needed to think, that I couldn't think with them in the house. The truth was I didn't want them there anymore. The truth was I had started checking the locks not twice but 5, 6, 7 times. The truth was I had stopped sleeping in the bedroom and was spending nights on the couch facing the front door, with every light in the house on. I drove to the coffee shop on Merchant Street that morning because the silence in the house had started to feel like a presence. The woman behind the counter wasn't someone I recognized. Older, maybe late 60s, she had the kind of face that had been weathered into something permanent and calm. Her name tag said Rue H. She set my coffee down and looked at me, not the polite glance of a stranger. She looked at me. "You're the one in the Callaway house," she said. I asked how she knew. She didn't answer that. She just looked at me for another moment, steady, unhurried, and said 3 words, 3 words. "He comes back." That was it. I didn't speak. She didn't elaborate. She turned to wipe down the counter like she'd commented on the weather. My hands were around the coffee cup. The coffee was hot. I couldn't feel it. "He comes back." Not, "Someone is watching you." Not, "Have you tried calling the police?" Not a pamphlet, not a theory, not a consultation fee. 3 words that every expert with every credential had somehow never said. 3 words that meant this is not a mystery. This is a pattern. This has happened before. I sat in that diner for 2 hours. I finally asked her who. She looked at me for a long moment. "Ask Raymond," she said. "He's been waiting for someone to ask." Raymond told me everything that afternoon, sitting on his porch with his hands folded in his lap, like a man unburdening something he'd carried too long. The Callaway house had a history. Not a dramatic one, no single incident, no famous crime. Just a pattern going back 30 years, of a man who had lived there once and returned periodically. A man who had never been successfully identified, charged, or stopped. A man who, according to Raymond, took small things, never anything valuable, always things that belonged to children, and who seemed to leave when confronted directly, only to return months later when the attention faded. Raymond had watched it happen to 2 families before us. He had tried to report it. He had been dismissed, misclassified, filed away. He had stopped trying. "I didn't know how to tell you," he said. "I didn't think you'd believe an old man over all those experts." We left the house in December. A permanent move. We didn't discuss it. We just both knew. The case is technically still open. I check in with the detective's office every few months. There have been no new developments. May's bowl still has 3 stones in it. Silver and pepper are still gone. She doesn't talk about the man outside anymore. I don't know if that means she's forgotten, or if it means something else. I've decided for now not to ask. I think about Ruth sometimes. about how she said those 3 words with no drama, no hesitation, like she was simply naming a thing that everyone in that town already knew the shape of. 20. 5 experts came into our lives with their tools and their frameworks and their professional distance. And not one of them said the thing that mattered. Sometimes the person who sees clearly isn't the one with the credentials. Sometimes it's the one who's been watching long enough, quietly enough, to know what no report can capture. I don't know if that comforts me or frightens me more. If you've ever lived somewhere that felt like it was holding a secret, somewhere that knew something about you that you didn't know yet, I'd like to hear about it. Some of us are still counting the things that went missing, still trying to figure out what was taken and what was left behind on purpose.